What's so key about the morning, I love to double down on anything where we can get twice as much for half the time. When we first wake in the morning and when we go to fall asleep at night, we're in this beautiful, programmable brain state where anything we do during that time, you get like double the effect of training the brain to see this as familiar.
Today's guest is Dr. Melissa Saunders. She's a chiropractor, mom of 3, and host of the Be Inspired Mama podcast. In today's conversation, Melissa offers deep and practical advice for every busy mom who wants to experience more joy, ease, and connection in their day and break free from constantly feeling anxious about a never-ending to-do list. This is a very powerful conversation, so stay tuned until the end.
If we can simply put our phone down and stay off our phone, that's a win right there. If we can instead not only put down the phone, but actually put a book in our hand, there's a neurological triggering of when we read across a page, the movement of our eyeballs going across the page and then quickly to the next line, it activates something called your corpus callosum. Basically, puts you into a state of calm.
The new science is super clear. Mitochondria are essential for optimum health and longevity. See, mitochondria are the battery packs inside all of your cells that create ATP, giving you cellular energy. And as we age, our mitochondria become damaged and dysfunctional, leading to low energy, brain fog, fatigue, and slower recovery from exercise. The good news is this supplement called MitoPure, created by Timeline Nutrition, can help because it supports your health at a foundational level by encouraging renewal of your mitochondria. MitoPure is a precise dose of a rare compound called urolithin A that helps your body clear out dysfunctional mitochondria and create new healthy ones, giving you more energy, better workouts, and more endurance to achieve any goals you have this year. MitoPure is the only urolithin A supplement on the market clinically proven to target the effects of age-related cellular decline and deliver increases in muscle strength and endurance without any change in exercise. Timeline is offering 10% off your order of MitoPure. Go to timeline.com/FitFatherProject. That's timeline.com/FitFatherProject to learn more. Dr. Melissa Saunders, welcome to the Fit Mother podcast. We are so happy to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited for this conversation.
I am too, because I think in the world of personal development, you have a particularly refreshing voice, one that empowers busy women to reclaim this sense of fulfillment, connection, inner peace amidst the chaos and the busyness and the pressures of being a mom, having a career, having a family, and you really focus on this idea of creating a mindset of self-care. And I think that's at the heart of a life that's thriving. It's not just doing, it's being and integrating all of that. So I'm so excited to have a deep and connected conversation with you. And I guess the proper place to kick off is what happened in your life that changed the way that you approach self-care? Like, why did this become such an important focal point of your life and now the work that you share with women all over the world?
Yeah, great question. I think just even that word self-care has become a little bit triggering to a lot of us women. At least it did for a while for me. I think we need a new term because we're not the same women as our mom's generation, and our self-care and our village and our support all has to look very different for the lives that we're living as today's women. But basically, I'm a chiropractor. I've got 3 children, running a business, similar, parallel with, it sounds like, all that you've got going on. And I'm sure, the women in your audience, like, whether we have a career, quote unquote, outside the home, which is such a weird phrase, but, no matter what, I think as women, we are like the CEO. We're juggling so many things.
Yeah.
And so like many women, I was juggling it all and, felt like I was doing it, quote unquote, right, like the way that I'm supposed to, trying my best to put my oxygen mask on first so I could take care of my family. And for me, that looked like having the job, having the career, and being, as healthy as possible and taking care of my kids as much as possible. And so the days just kept getting longer. It's like, I think we hear as women, we've got to make time for ourselves. We've got to fit that in. And there was nowhere to fit it in. And so what slowly started to creep into my life is, just waking up earlier, always feeling behind the ball. So like, where can I squeeze in the extra moments?
Mm-hmm.
For me, what that looked like was, waking up, slamming the coffee so
Yeah.
I could meet the day with the energy that I felt was required, hopping right away on the emails, the socials, like subconsciously asking the question, where am I needed? Where am I behind?
Yeah.
Going to the gym, being blasted with lights and cortisol before my day even started, the rhythm. Like, if this isn't some woman's story, I think we've got some version of this where we wake up and we're behind the ball. And so we go into the day with a state of overwhelm and stress.
Mm-hmm.
And then we run through our day, as we all do. And for me, at the end of the day, it was then, having a glass of wine while I was making dinner
Totally.
for everyone to try to unwind, and then go to bed and just repeat it the next day. And so I think, quote unquote, that worked for a while. But what happened is I hit my limit. And I knew it was coming. Like, I knew that what I was doing wasn't sustainable. I felt fried. I felt exhausted. I felt
Yeah.
like the to-do list was never ending. I felt like I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't ever fully present. I was either thinking about what just happened or doing woman math, which is like, okay, I got to be here at 5, so I got to do this at 4, and blah, blah, blah. And so I hit my edge. The edge for me looked like sickness, like I got really sick. And I think, the details of my story, I don't want to get into too much. I think that's for another podcast. People can find that everywhere, because I think the important pieces are, for each woman that hits this place, the way it shows up is going to look differently.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got this stress bucket, which I'm sure is an analogy that you've talked about, something similar. Um, and all of our stresses of our life go into that bucket, and we're fine until we hit that overflow. And so
Mm-hmm.
whatever that overflow is looks different for all of us. For mine, it was, I literally lost my mind. I couldn't remember my children's names. I couldn't find my way to our office. Like, I hit it. And it was extremely scary. And thank God, I had the resources and the knowing to get help and figure out what was going on. Mine was a chemical stress that put me over the edge. And so we needed some detox and to do some things. But ultimately, the biggest thing I realized, Dr. Anthony, was when I got better, I knew that I was just going to be putting myself in a situation where it was destined to happen again.
Totally.
So I realized I needed to figure out, we constantly hear this as women, like, oh, you're busy, but like, you got to make time for yourself. You got to take care of yourself. And it's so frustrating because it's yet another thing that we're told that we have to do that's
Yes.
not attainable. It's not realistic. And instead of looking at the system as being designed to fail, we beat ourselves up. It's
Yes.
one more thing that we're not doing right. So more guilt and shame. So I got to a place where I was like, I've got to figure out a different way.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I think thinking about the fit mothers listening to this whole like need to do more, doing, that's so synonymous with being the CEO of a household, having all the pressures of culture that says that women should be a certain way and need to continue to look beautiful, be successful, be a great mom. I think that's at the basis of like a fitness journey too, because I think when someone's getting fit and healthy, it's like there's a to-do box of things. So I got to eat healthy food. I got to buy the groceries. I got to find time to work out. And there's always this low grade anxiety baked into this experience of always needing to do more, never having arrived, managing a lot of this bandwidth mentally that ultimately leads to the point of stress where you end up like binging or having wine, or eventually in your case, like the bucket gets so overfilled, you break down. So at the same time, we have our lives in the stuff to maintain. We do want to exercise. We do want to take care of our kids. So like, what's the new operating system that you discovered? And what are the simple ways that you now run your day that are making things still successful? The wheels and the gears of your life and your family are still turning, maybe even better than ever, but you feel more joyful. Like, how does someone make that transition to the new operating system?
Yeah, great question. I really want to highlight this part for the busy women listening. Like, one, it really works. It truly does. And two, it's easier than anything I've ever tried to implement. It's no
Cool.
time, no money, which I feel like as women, we constantly are presented with the new system or way or gadget or thing, and it doesn't work. So I've literally started to change more from my outcome throughout the day being tied to my to-do list to
Mm-hmm.
simply reframing and switching my focus to how I want to be as I do it. And that sounds
Mm-hmm.
like so simple and so small. And I know we're going to get into this because it's such an important message for the women. And if we just kind of want to go a little bit zoomed out, I mean, as women, we are naturally, our power comes in our beingness. We've become over masculine in our doingness. And as I say that, like, please know, I am a doer. Like, I'm a busy
Yeah.
woman. I love to do all the things. Like, I pride myself in checking off the to-do list. And it's the marriage of both, you know, like
Yes.
the way it translates for me in this new path, this new paradigm of self-care that I think we all need as women today is I get to the end of the day and I feel satisfied. I go to pick up my kids from school and I'm like ready for them. Like, I'm present, I got it all done, and I'm there. And, you know, another thing I think we hear often as women, especially mothers, is enjoy every moment. It goes so fast. But like, that's again a lot of pressure because sometimes the moments aren't enjoyable. And like sometimes it's just really hard and we're trying our best and we're juggling it all. We're also told to ask for help, like lean on your village. Well, there's not a village the way that there used to be. You know, I grew up in the Midwest in a neighborhood, and I think a lot of us in this demographic, like we grew up playing outside and running around.
Yeah.
And now the kids today, it's like scheduled play dates, and
Yeah.
you don't go to your neighbors to borrow a cup of sugar. Like, it's just very different, but we're using these same phrases of how women are supposed to get through this phase of our life that just aren't realistic.
So it seems like just recognizing the cultural shift that's happened, taking off some of the pressure of these expectations and the weight we put on ourselves, accepting, you know, all emotions are okay, even the overwhelmed ones, because they're a part of the experience and they're just revealing parts of our lives that might not be working as well as we'd like them to be. And that's okay. It's not everything
Yeah.
is only perfect in exactly how it is in the totality of it. How does someone find more presence and joy in the activities and shift from being this human doing back into being a human being?
Yeah. Well, there's kind of a few pieces here. So let's dive through it one by one. So first, we've got to recognize that we as humans are going to crave what's familiar. So it's part of our survival mechanism. I mean, you know this as the
Yeah.
doctor that you are. Like, we literally will crave what's familiar. And so that can mean that if our lives feel chaotic, overwhelmed, and stressful, we will literally make conscious choices every day to stay stuck in that loop because it's what we
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And so what we first got to do is, I think, using words and literally identifying what is it that we want out of our day, our life, our year, whatever, you know. So start to, I think writing is like a very important part of this process, whether it's in a journal or a piece of paper, like describing how we currently feel throughout or at the end of our day, and then picking words for what we want to feel.
Yeah.
So, like, for example, I think a lot of the women in my community, it's things like anxious, stressed, chaotic, exhausted, overwhelmed, right?
Totally.
They want to feel more ease, fun,
Yes.
joy, lightness. And
Yes.
sometimes it's even hard for these women to write this down because it's like, yeah, I want it, but it's never going to happen.
Right.
But it can. And so, you know, what we've got to do is we've got to start to make these states and these feelings familiar. And the way that we do that is by practicing them. And so you think about in a moment, you know, any woman listening to this who feels like we've got no time, right? You just like pray for the end of the day or the end of the week when you could put your feet up and watch a Netflix, maybe have a glass of wine, whatever it is, like relax. Well, the reality is we probably, if we're honest with ourselves, we probably have like even a couple minutes, because all these things take a couple minutes, a couple minutes throughout our day here and there
Totally.
that we waste.
Yes.
And the way that we waste them is we distract ourselves out of them because
Yep.
it's not familiar. It's not comfortable. We're not used to doing nothing, and we don't feel like we're productive. We don't feel worthy. We've tied our sense of worthiness to what we're doing. And so we've literally got to like train ourselves like, oh, here's a moment. This is where we start to flex that muscle of calm, contentment, ease, and joy so that we don't get to our end of our day and then try to make room for it. Like, we
Yes.
prioritize it.
I love that. And I think that's a really like subtle and yet powerful point. This idea that we like block time for ourselves and it happens at the end of the day and then the rest of the day is something, it's just a mental construct. Like life is nothing like that. It's a fluid, dynamic interweave. And I think the only way to quote, get it all done while being peaceful and present and having self-care baked in is to make it a fluid, constant dance where you're moving through one task. You drop the kids off at school, perhaps. Then you have a couple moments in the car to take some deep breaths, read a book for 5 minutes or listen to something that's really uplifting. And then you move on to the next thing. It just becomes like a more joyful flow, because ultimately, if we don't do that, we're just kind of penting up these things that we want to do, or self-care that feels like it's neglected. And then we feel like we're not loving ourselves. And then all this resentment builds up. So we're kind of like purging that by weaving it in. And I know for you, it all starts with a proper morning routine, because this is like sacred time that you can set the tone for the day, as opposed to being reactive with, phones and other things. You have a very proactive start to the day, and your whole family does it too. So I'd love to hear about that, because I do think, practically speaking, this morning routine concept that you have so nailed down is one of the great traction points for people to start with this.
Yeah, great. So again, like 5 minutes, 2 minutes, ladies. It doesn't have to be crazy. I think in the world of like bioharmonizing, biohacking, at least for me, I see these things online and I'm like, yeah, that's not a realistic 1 hour morning of gratitude, sun gazing, journaling. Like I've got 3 kids. I got to get to school. We leave the
Yeah.
house before the sun's up. Like I'm doing my
Yeah.
best. So
Totally.
start with 5 minutes. It's likely going to turn into more. But really, what's so key about the morning, I love to double down on anything where we can get twice as much for half the time.
Yeah.
And so if the goal is to feel ease, joy, connection, satisfaction at the end of the day, and like extra bonus throughout our day,
Mm-hmm.
we can practice this state by catching the moments throughout the day, 2 minutes here and there, like you said, in the car, listening to something, maybe getting in nature, doing some breath work. But what's incredible about the morning, and actually at night too, so when we first wake in the morning and when we go to fall asleep at night, we're in this beautiful programmable brain state
Yeah.
where anything we do during that time, you get like double the effect of training the brain to see this as familiar. So what does that
Mm-hmm.
mean? That means if we normally wake up and we rush into emails and socials, whatever, anything on our phone, essentially,
Yeah.
we get out of this beautiful dreamlike trance state. We get
Yep.
pulled into beta, and we're literally teaching our body and our brain, this is what you do today. Like, this is how you live today. Like, this is how you
Mm-hmm.
operate today. We
Yes.
From that place, it becomes way harder to find those pockets later and actually enjoy them. We're
Yes.
literally like training the brain. When we have space, this is what we do. So no
Mm-hmm.
wonder if you drop your kids off and you have 2 minutes, it's like, I don't know, I could easily find myself scrolling the phone, getting on the
Yes.
emails, catching up. Like, what can I fill this space with that takes
Yep.
care of the to-do list? So when we switch the morning for just 5 minutes and train our brain to sit in a space of calm, contentment, and like ease into the day, we change the total game for the day. And so what I have found is for so many of us women, this is all great. Like the last thing I want to do is share another concept that makes no sense or no woman knows how to do. And so she just doesn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So what I found for me too is like, great, give me that space. I have no idea. Like, what do I do? Like, okay,
Yeah.
I'll get up for 5 minutes in the morning, but like, what do I do? This is so bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
So in my community, on my online tools, like so much of the stuff I share is free. People can check it out. I'm sure we'll link it. But I create what I call anchor tools. So all I'm going to ask of you is like saunter out of your room, find a spot. I call it your sit spot, like establish a spot. Mine's right behind me here. I've got like a penf mat. You can't see my pillow and a book.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you things to do in that space, but what they're actually going to do is they're going to put you into a state of being. So like
Yeah.
the one major rule is just anything not on your phone. A book, I say, is like one of the best gateway tools for, I like to
Mm-hmm.
use the word connection instead of self-care.
Yeah.
Because if we can simply put our phone down and stay off our phone, that's a win right there. Like we're
Yep.
keeping our brain in a relaxed state. We all know
Yep.
this, but like I think we just tend to, it's so habitual. If we can instead not only put down the phone, but actually put a book in our hand, there's a neurological like triggering of when we read across a page. So I used to do functional neurological exercises with children
Yeah.
to calm the brain. The movement of our eyeballs going across the page and then quickly to the next line, it activates something called your corpus callosum. It triggers both hemispheres of your brain, basically puts
Yes.
you into a state of calm.
Yes.
So if you can just, even if you read like Cat in the Hat, you are teaching your brain, okay, we are going to lock in calm. It's going to be easier for you to find that later. And so what I do
Yeah.
is I take it one step further. I've got a free book club. So I'm literally like, here you go. Here's a delicious book that's going to get you into a state of calm. It's going to empower and inspire you. And once a month, we're going to get together as a circle of women and we're going to talk about it and like laugh about the craziness going
Cool.
on in our life. So, I think the anchor tools are really important, but if we
Yes.
can just drop the phone at least for the 5 minutes as we wake and before we go to sleep, like that's a huge check win right there.
It is. And I'd love to inject my personal reflection because I've kind of stumbled upon the same process through my own life experience. Is getting up, I also value and prize deeply the sacred brainwave state, the slower brainwaves, theta waves, alpha waves, where you're creative, still in a dreamlike state. It's a perfect time to just feel and breathe and stay in that state, which that state is destroyed by very bright lights, by stuff that's, pulling us into normal operation like the phone, as you said. So I keep my blue blocking glasses on. I have some very dark red ones that keep it very dark in the morning for like the first 30 minutes when I'm meditating or laying on my PEMF mat as well, and just taking a little bit of time and space. I love what you do, though, is you create that actual anchor space in your house, like a place that you actually physically go to, which I think is so powerful from a habit perspective, because it's like your little sacred zone that you anchor into every day that is also the place where you get nourished by great books and maybe by your kids and your family around. So that's wonderful. And
Thank
again,
you.
that could take literally 3 minutes, 5 minutes. It doesn't matter. It's just the fact that it's done is training that pattern that normally is reactive to be much more present and connected in your body, in intentional living. And then that's going to echo out. And it not going to mean every day is going to be perfect, but I imagine if you do this more and more, it kind of cleanses you more and more over time. And then the days feel more present, connected, and joyful.
Yeah, I mean, what starts to happen over time is, rather than chaos, stress, and overwhelm becoming our like homeostatic state, not that that's what it's supposed to be, but I think that's become so many of our norms. What starts to become the norm is, balance, joy, and ease. And so, of course, life happens. Like this morning, I had one of those mornings. We're running late. My husband's actually out of the country. I've got the 3 kids, and we're like late out the door. And then the
Yeah.
youngest doesn't want to go to school. So, like, that pulls you out of your center. But the more we can train the center to what we want it to be, the easier it is to find it.
Yes.
And just to go back on the morning spot and how impactful that is, as a mom for a while, when I knew there was a problem in what I was doing, I knew I needed to change up like how my day started. My first roadblock was, well, what about the kids? Right.
Yeah.
So part of the reason I used to wake up and like go right into hyper mode is because I had to get it done before the kids were up. I had to like fill my cup before they needed me. Well, what was really interesting is, we role model for our kids and they watch what we do. And so what I started to do is I would wake up, I'd go into my spot, and I just, I think because I knew how important it was and how I was showing up for my family, like I made it non-negotiable. And my kids not only followed suit, they love it too. So they all like end up with me on the mat. We're snuggling in. And what's so cool about that is that I feel like I'm changing the game for them.
Yeah.
So they will not, they don't wake up and go into stress mode. Like they wake up a few minutes early because they want that space.
Yeah.
And then last thing, I just want to touch on the light, because that's really important. And it's so amazing in your home as a mom to help your kids ease into the day and to go to sleep early is the light. And so what I've actually done in our home is we've got some of the great therapeutic red lights, right? Love them. And then what I've also done is in almost every room, we have a lamp, and I replaced the bulb in the lamp with a red light bulb from Amazon. They're like
Nice.
$4.
Yeah.
And so if the sun isn't out in the morning or if the sun has gone down at night, all of our lights in our home are red,
Yep.
and no more bedtime struggles. Like our kids, I mean, our oldest son is 14 And I see his friends, when they sleep over, they want to push it till like 11 midnight. Our kids are like falling asleep at 8:30 at night. Like they are going into their bed because they're in that natural circadian rhythm. So
Yeah.
like literally no bedtime fights. Literally everyone wakes up into like this yummy morning lounge atmosphere and just like
Hmm.
snuggles in, reads some books, and then we start the day.
If you're a coffee lover, you know that not all coffee is created equal. Most coffee today is loaded with pesticides, mycotoxins, and heavy metals, things you definitely don't want in your morning brew. That's where Life Boost coffee comes in. It's the only doctor backed coffee that's pure, safe, and packed with flavor. Life Boost Coffee Trust Pure process screens for over 450 toxins, so you're getting a clean, low acid coffee that's gentle on your stomach. Their beans are USDA certified organic, single origin, and grown without pesticides at high altitudes, meaning more antioxidants and a rich, smooth taste. Life Boost also offers a decaf option made with the Swiss water method, so you can enjoy a pure chemical-free decaf that's just as delicious as the original. What really sets Life Boost apart? It's doctor crafted, trusted by health professionals, and delivers on flavor without the bitterness or acidity found in other coffees. You'll taste and feel the difference with every sip. Visit lifeboostcoffee.com/fitfamily and use code FITFAMILY10 for 10% off your order. That's lifeboostcoffee.com/fitfamily with code FITFAMILY10 for a healthier coffee experience. Decaf included. I promise you'll absolutely love it. That's powerful. I mean, obviously the practical tip about, getting the circadian lights as simple as the specific lamp that has the red light. I mean, that's super actionable. Someone could literally go and buy something on Amazon while listening to this and make
Right.
that swap. I love, like, I think a deeper thing that I love is what you've done is you've created integration with your family and your routines. You've ditched the mindset that I think a lot of women have, that it has to be a certain way. Like I have to have me time first and then family later. And that creates a structure that is very rigid, that inherently has stress baked into it because you're on a time crunch now. And you've just made it integrated and experience so much more flow and benefit for your kids. So it's even better than if you were just doing your thing and then coming to them later. So that's powerful. I think that I've noticed for myself, I've carried many degrees of anxiety due to like thinking patterns of thinking things had to be a certain way when it was just like not true thinking. And once that dissolved or I saw through that, life becomes a lot more fluid and open. And there's many ways that things can be. And it's a lot less stressful when you don't have to like architect things exactly how you think you need it to be. And I'm not going to say this is the case with all women, but I think a lot of women, especially a lot of moms, want to control things so much. You want to control because you want to create the best inputs for your kids and you have this schedule to control. And I think that for me, the spiritual path is recognizing that it comes through the letting go of control, the acceptance of what is, and just like this, like loss of power that gives you ultimate power because you're more connected with just the flow of life as opposed to the sense of a mind, body, ego that's trying to like navigate this world and control everything. So I don't know if you have any commentary on that, but I think
I,
it's relevant for the discussion.
I do. Yeah. I've got kind of two things. One, I think as women, I think part of the control comes from like this load we carry of we've got this time with our children. And so we've got to do like a great job and whatever that looks like. But I think, realizing that one of the greatest things we can give our children is the ability to regulate their nervous system.
Yeah.
And I think, from your story, similar, like when we see our parents stressed, I think that's one of the most hardest things as a child, right? So if we can let our children witness us going through the flow of the day, right? And taking moments for ourselves and communicating like what that is and why it's important. And also communicating when we fall off, right? Like I'm human and I always want my children to see me in my humanness, but I also want them to like kind of witness the process so that they can learn these skills too. So for
Yeah.
instance, like this morning, if I didn't show up the way that I wanted to with my daughter, who obviously was just having like emotional needs, I would love to always come from a place where I'm like balanced and aligned and the ego is not getting the best of me and I can be fully present with her. If there's a moment where I don't do that and then I don't like how I showed up, I'm very quick to catch it and like speak out loud what
Yeah.
I would say in my head, like, oh, that didn't feel good. Like that wasn't right. I will
Yeah.
then also like physically take it off them and put it back on me. I'm like, that's not your stress. That's mine. I didn't
Yes.
get my minute this morning. Like, I'm going to work it in, but like letting them see that I think is important.
Mm-hmm.
The other, I think the ego conversation is something very top of mind for me right now. I'm writing a book with Hay House, and, I've got this theory, like, I think I'm all about today's women doing things differently. So, whether it's self care and making that less of a to do and more about the be, and the ego conversation, so much of what I've studied and read about the ego is getting beyond it, right? And getting, I guess the way that I've translated it is like observing it, right? Observing it, not owning it as part of us. But I think it is a part of us. And so why should we feel bad or like this, that there would be this piece of us that isn't there to serve us? So what if we started to team up with the ego? There's the ego has something to say. Like, I think it's there for a reason. And so I think basically I see it as like we've got the ego and the true self. Our true self is when we're in like that flow where everything's good, we can handle the meltdown, blah blah blah. Ego creeps in and like freaking throws us out. But what if we started to conscious parent our ego? What if our true
Mm-hmm.
self could be like, okay, you're super stressed right now. What's the problem? Like, what do you need? And we actually created space for the ego to tell us, like, what was going on? What is it that it requires? And
Mm-hmm.
from that, we could show up as our whole self. Because I
Yeah.
think, one, there's no parts of us that aren't good.
Mm-hmm.
And two, I think there's so much beauty in what's called shadow emotions, right?
Yes.
Fear, resentment, anger. Like, especially as women, we're taught that these are not good emotions and we stuff them. Like, that's where boundaries, resilience, growth, passion, dedication, forward momentum, like, those are also really beautiful things that come from the ego. So, can you
Mm-hmm.
imagine if instead of getting beyond it, we actually worked with it? Like, we could be freaking unstoppable.
That's awesome. I love that message. And my take on it is that the ego is something that naturally develops as our personality that operates in the world based on our early relationships, our traumas, our challenges. Ultimately, because we want to feel loved at our core, we want to feel connected, we want to feel worthy. We have these inherent needs for like wholeness and safety and purpose. And our ego kind of is this geometry that's created as our personality based on our body and our mind and our early experiences. And so when it flares or when something happens, it's like there's a deeper root behind that. And so in a sense, the ego is like a prism that you can look into and look deeper. It's like, oh, what's behind that? Oh, why do I feel like I need to control everything? Oh, why do I feel scared in these instances? Oh, why do I feel like I'm repeating these same patterns that I saw my mom do? It's like the thing that allows us to look deeper into ourself through the fact that the ego expresses these shadow emotions, and it's great.
I
One
love
thing I'm
that.
playing with is as I've walked the spiritual path for many years personally, is kind of like this idea where at first I thought like transcending the ego was something of there's a humility that comes in the spiritual path where you drop this idea that you're some grand badass, whatever kind of concept that wasn't really like true. There's like the kind of pride in that, and you come into humility. And now where I feel like I'm coming back into is this experience of more like pure power, like experiencing, like leaning into the fact that we have a lot of light and power. And I think it's that Marianne Williamson quote. It's like our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. And I think that what we ultimately would all love to feel is like obviously connected, peaceful, joyful, but also powerful in our own right, powerful in a way that's not like straining or trying or posturing. So what kind of things do you do to empower yourself to feel more powerful in whatever that means to you?
I love it. I mean, I love that whole rant you just went on, the ego, everything. And I think the answer is within that for me. Um, you know, I think for women, when this voice of our ego creeps in, which often shows up as like not good enough or
Yeah.
criticism or judgment or either judging ourselves or judging others, we stuff it. I think we stuff
Yeah.
it. We distract ourselves from it. It doesn't feel
Right.
good. And so we pull ourselves out of it. I go in, and it sounds like you go in too.
Yeah.
I think so much of our power comes from inward. There's a beautiful
Yeah.
book. I'm sure you're familiar. Paulo Coelho. I don't know if I'm
Yeah.
saying it right.
You
It's
are.
inward. And it's one of those you grab and turn to a page, and it's like these beautiful, inspiring little poems. that help remind us of how beautiful those shadow feelings are. And
Mm-hmm.
so I love your analogy of a prism. I think the way that I know, the way that we tap into our power as women is by being willing to go into those feelings and stop
Yeah.
dismissing them, because that is where our power is.
So it's such a beautiful answer. And I also think that kind of dovetails into why you and I are spending so much time cultivating community, because at one level, you go into it personally, like to
Mhm.
investigate that yourself. And then real power also comes when you can be vulnerable enough to actually share that.
Yeah,
And then also see that the same things that you're going through are mirrored in the other person's prism. And then we can experience the sameness of all of us, like behind the different geometry of each prism. It's like, oh crap, we're all doing the same thing. And that's, I think, when we
thing.
start to feel more oneness and love and flow and true compassion and connection. It's like when our hearts can open is when we recognize this in ourselves, we recognize it with others, we're vulnerable enough to share it. And now we have like collective power. I don't know if that resonates with you, but that seems true
100%.
to me.
100%. And I think, when we can show up from that place, which I think we could spend a minute on, because that can be a scary place for women to go, but
Mm-hmm.
your community shows up for you. And
Yeah.
I think that's so key as women, just going back to, we constantly hear ask for help. It takes a village. Like, where are they? They will, whether you call it universe, quantum, God, source, whatever it is, the
Yeah.
invisible force, like your community finds you because you're now resonating on an energetic level that's pulling these people in. We all have these dark shadow emotions.
Yeah.
And when we can approach life from our whole authentic, vulnerable self, people find us. Like, that's an open, powerful place to come from. And people are magnetically attracted to that.
I totally agree. And I also am like thinking the contrast of like we have this fast-paced, technologically driven society that has a lot of distraction mechanisms and stuff that's not
Yeah.
serving us. At the same time, now we have like the ability to have online community with resonant people that can totally fill us up. So it's like it's like such a double-edged sword. We have one side that can totally nourish us and charge us up, and another side that can distract us and add to anxiety. So I think a big part of power, I guess, would be like discernment in how you operate with the tools and distractions of today's modern culture. So I guess this is a little segue, but I'm curious, how do you navigate your habits with your phone
Mm-hmm.
to while still being active and doing, modern lifestyle and business and family and staying connected with people? What's the deal with that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, because the reality is it's part of our life, right? And so we all use it. Clearly, we're all on it. So how do we boundary
Mm-hmm.
it? I won't go on first thing in the morning, and so
Yeah.
I've got a boundary in the morning that's really important for me. I don't go on at night as well. Like, those are just very, very sacred times for me. So I plug it somewhere in the kitchen. It's gone.
Nice.
Um, I do love social media. I love it for connection purposes.
Mm-hmm.
I typically do a quick check-in before I go on anything, whether it's email, social media, or otherwise. Like, why am I doing this? Because a
Why am I
lot of
doing this?
times I'll find I'm just doing it because it's like something to do.
Yeah.
So I'll know, like, if I get to the place, I don't know if you've ever hit this place or if other women listening, if I'm checking my phone at the red lights, like, I'm due for a detox.
Yeah.
And so I
100%.
typically like to do like a Sunday once a week. It's not realistic for me to not be on my phone. We live in a very busy community. Our children are very busy. So there's always text messages, meetups
Mm-hmm.
and stuff I want them to be a part of. But I typically will choose at least like half of a day, if not a full day, where I try to go off socials and emails.
Mm-hmm.
So that's important for me. And it's always like really, really welcome.
Yeah.
It's helpful. I don't like being on my screens when my children are with me. Like, for me, it's like a
Mm-hmm.
gut. I don't know. I don't like it. So I try to get as much of that as possible done before they're home.
Yeah.
I don't go on it if I wake up in the middle of the night. Like, it's a hard no. If anything, I'll do like meditation or I'll read a book.
Yeah.
Those are my main ones. But I think really for me, the big one, Anthony, is like doing the check in before I go on. Am I doing this
Yeah.
because it's just habitual and I'm pulled to it? Or what's my intention here? And like, what's my timeline?
Dang. I mean, that's just like that there is so life changing. I think we can apply that whole getting present and asking like why, like what is the deeper feeling behind this impulse? We could do that with food cravings. We
Yeah.
could do that with, an angry or mean word that we might want to say to somebody. Like dude, that would change your whole life.
Yeah. There's like an interesting I don't know if people can put comments and stuff in this format, but a lot of times when I habitually go to the phone and I like do that check-in, like if I'm like, what am I doing this for? I'll answer myself with who needs me. Like I'm
Hmm.
literally subconsciously trying to find who needs me.
Yeah.
And in that moment, my reframe, what I say now is, well, I do. And so then I'll put the
Ah.
phone down and I mean, it's like the nothingness, right? So I'm at a red light, like
Yes.
just scooping around. Looking at the world in 3D is
Yeah,
so delicious for our brain. I know that sounds like
it
so woo
is.
woo and silly, but
It's not.
it's these simple moments that make all the difference.
I totally agree. And I think you can even notice this the more you do that and just become present and intentionally flex your muscle of doing nothing,
Hmm.
like actually taking the car ride if you're by yourself and don't listen to a podcast, don't listen to music,
Right,
don't check your phone, just
right.
like be in your body and do the thing. Or if you're out in public, it's amazing sometimes. It seems like most people are just so glued. You could be like the only person looking up and surveying the landscape. And it's
Yeah,
like, wow, am I the only one that's really awake right now?
yeah.
And the answer is a lot of people are waking up because the other direction of staying asleep just comes down to more stress, more anxiety, and ultimately that's going to come with suffering that course corrects into this kind of conversation that we're talking about here.
Hmm.
I love this. This is about like really about boundaries with self. What kind of boundaries do you hold with like relationships and others? Like, what other ways do you flex boundaries in the realm of self care slash connection?
Yeah, that's been a big one for me. I mean, I would say I've been like an empath most of my life. So, part of when I was assessing like once I got better, how I could not get myself in that same situation, I started to realize how much I was showing up for everybody else, obviously, right? But
Mm-hmm.
like when I really boiled that down and started to ask questions like it was really just tuning into myself. So if I got invited to a social event, I'm social, but I'm like very much an introvert. I started to realize
Mm-hmm.
like I don't like to go out at night. I like to be home at night. I'm like a family kind of girl. And so I realized how many events I was saying yes to that I didn't want to be at. And so what I
Yeah.
would do is when I would go to these events and I would feel like internal and quiet, I would drink to be able to show up the way that I felt the room needed me to. And I'm not talking
Right.
about like raging alcoholic by any means, like one or two beverages, but I wasn't doing it because I wanted. I was doing it to create a state change that I felt like the
Yeah.
room needed.
Yeah.
So I often now will just do a check in with myself before I say yes. Like if it's not a hell yes, then it's probably a
Mm-hmm.
no. For me, like boundaries, I came up with the acronym NO standing for nourish oneself.
Yeah.
Like if I can say no and instead of that thing I can either nourish myself or be with my family, that's going to win. That took a
Yeah.
while for me. It's like easier said than done because what starts to happen is we start to feel like we're letting people down, right? We start to feel like our friends going to still want to be our friends if we're not showing up. But I started to realize for me, again, because I hit that point of sickness, which I'm thankful for
Mm-hmm.
sure. Um, if they weren't going to be my friends because I wasn't living by these standards that weren't working for me anymore, then they weren't my true friends anyway.
Totally.
And so a lot of the women that gravitate towards my communities are the cycle breakers and the women that have outgrown their friendship circle.
Yeah. Which is a total part of life. Even accepting that, I think it's like can be hard. But yes, we change in our growth trajectory, and that means certain people are no longer resonant. And boundaries are a good filtering mechanism for that. And the
Absolutely.
people that really love you will understand, and especially if you explain why. Like if
Yeah,
you explain, I really, this I need some me time to recharge my battery and XYZ. The people who love you will understand, and also it gives you more bandwidth because I think we have the ability to fill our time with so many people that may not be the main people we need to connect with. And having kids certainly teaches you that, right? You want to lean in and give so much love to them. Um,
absolutely.
next question, kind of towards the end of this, I want to talk about the power of books because I know this is a huge part of your life. Back to what you shared with your morning routine, starting your day with books, obviously running the book club, you've been super nourished by books in your life. So please talk about the power of books. And I'd also love you to include some plugs for some amazing books that you've read in the last year that you would suggest people pick up after listening to this.
Yeah. Oh, I love books. I didn't feel like I was someone that had time to read books as a busy mom, as a busy woman. I mean, literally like 2 pages a day. Like we can all get
Mm-hmm.
in 2 pages a day. And it's amazing what we can get done if a book is in our purse or with us at all times, like carpool line or just one quick segue. I was stuck at the DMV and craziest experience. I mean, I ended up being there for literally 10 hours.
Oh,
Like their
wow.
computer shut down and oh, it was horrible. But I had a book with me. And it was like I was a dinosaur that nobody had ever met before because people were like, "Oh my god, you have a real book!" Like I
Yeah.
was so happy to be sitting there. I literally read a book from cover to cover, which
And
was
that's a gift. That's
amazing.
probably a book you wouldn't have had time to read. That's how you turn like a frustration into a gift because you had this
Yes.
tool of a book that's nourishing.
It's exactly what it does, Anthony. So
Yeah.
like in car pickup line or if whatever, I've got my book. Like it's such a
Yeah.
beautiful thing. So books to me are a gateway tool for connection. Like again, it's a win if we don't pick up our phone a couple times throughout the day, right? I still use my phone, I'm still on it, I'm still on socials, all the things, but instead pick up a book. Um,
Mm-hmm.
again, just what we talked about with what it does for the brain. And then it expands our viewpoints, right? So, especially
Mm-hmm.
for reading these, I always shop from what do they call it? Self help. I want to rename it to literature of possibility
That's cool.
because you think about, I mean, I've seen these things on social. Like, if you could read these 12 books this year, how would your life change? Right. And it's like
Yeah.
Atomic Habits and um, whatever, all these great books. Like, we can read a book a month if you can read 5 pages a day. Those are
Yeah.
typically the lengths of books that I suggest in the book club. They're life changing because even if you pick up one thing from the book and integrate it,
Right.
it's so powerful. I feel like too, as women, we can feel really lonely and isolated, even though we're surrounded by people. And for me, I never feel that way if I've got a great book. Like it's something,
Mm-hmm.
it's an anchor tool.
Yeah.
It gets me on the couch for those 2 minutes that I'm craving of nourishment and putting my feet up.
Yeah. Because it's connection. It's connection with the author and the intimate, important ideas that they took the time to create a book. I know now with you writing a book, it probably means even more to you, the process of creation. It's connection with how what you read spurs thinking and feeling in yourself. So it's like self-exploration through ideas and it's inherently reflective. You read an idea and you're thinking like, oh, how does this apply? Or do I do
Yeah.
this? Do I not do this? So,
It
so
brings us,
beautiful.
yeah, it brings us back to our imagination and
Yeah.
daydreaming. I love those states. I think whenever I've seen my kids like daydreaming out the car window, I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like the best mom ever. Because accessing that part of our brain,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
think about the books you've read versus the movie you've seen. If you've seen the same, like the book is just so
It's
much more
richer.
expansive because you create
Yeah.
the picture in your mind.
Awesome. Well, please tell us about your online community, your book club, and ways that people can connect with you after this conversation if they felt very inspired, they love your vibe, and they want to know more about what you're doing.
Sure, yeah. And then I'll mention some of my favorite books too I've read.
Please.
So my main website is drmelissasonners.com. Maybe we'll link it in here in case
We
spelling
totally
is
will. Show
confusing.
notes if
Okay.
anyone's checking this out, YouTube, there'll be links in the description, all that
Perfect.
stuff.
Yep. So in that, there's a resources section, lots of fun freebies in there. I've got like a journaling webinar and framework for the busy woman who maybe wants to journal but doesn't know how. I literally walk you through
Mm-hmm.
that with prompts. It's a really powerful process because you start to see these patterns of the negative voice in your head. And then you can start to tap into like, what is the powerful aspect of that? What are the boundaries that I need, right? Things like I'm
Mm-hmm.
angry because, or this person's triggering me because, like going
Yeah.
inward to those emotions can really bring a lot of clarity to our lives. I've got something in there called the connection code. So, okay, you've got these 2 minutes here and there. You don't know what to do with them. I'm going to help walk you through a journey of creating different ideas for whatever you're feeling. For instance, just
Mm-hmm.
real quick, if you're in 2 minutes and maybe based on where you are in your cycle, you don't want to be active. Like what's a
Yeah.
nourishing downtime kind of thing? You've got two
Mm-hmm.
minutes and your head is spinning from like stressful work. What could get you in your body? Like we figure that out
Mm-hmm.
together. It's a personalized plan. And then the book nook is in there. Yep. So each month I suggest a book. Right now, this is November. We've got December, January, February, March, and April books lined up. I also bring in the author. I've got some New York Times bestselling authors coming in.
Nice.
The women in my private community, the Beehive, get to come into those calls and ask their Q&A of the authors at the end. Couple of my favorite books I've read. God, that's such a loaded question. There's so many. Right now, we're actually reading this book. It's called Thrive in Overdrive by Dr. Patrick Porter. He talks a lot about like the brain waves and like getting our bodies into a state of calm so that we can choose how we respond to everything in our external environment, which I think is so powerful because that's all we can control. I love Dr. Joe Dispenza. I love, love, love his work. Marianne Williamson, Return to Love, I think is such a powerful one. We read Atomic Habits together. We're going to read Eat Like a Girl by Dr. Mindy Peltz. Fast Like a Girl was another one we brought in. Dare to Feel by Alex Roxo is coming up. Lots of good ones. Oh, and last one, Do Less by Kate Northrup. She's really, aligned in like taking these quiet moments and more stillness in our life as women and how to do that as a busy woman.
Well, wonderful. I really appreciated this conversation. I think this conversation was also a representation of everything that we talked about. It was deep. It was connected. It was fun. The time flew by. And I will also put a plug for your podcast, the Be Inspired Mama podcast. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can check that out. And it's just a really nourishing place if you want to be able to have good stuff flowing into you that's uplifting you. That's a wonderful podcast. So thank you for everything you do, Melissa. I appreciate you so much. I'm glad that we connected here. And I thought this was a really wonderful conversation. And I'm so excited for our Fit Mothers to listen to this.
Thank you. Thank you for everything that you're doing for us as women. It's so powerful. I love that you're making it so realistic and attainable. So thank you. This has been a beautiful conversation.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Hey there, my friend. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the Fit Mother Project podcast. If you love what you heard, I have a favor to ask you. Please consider taking 60 seconds right now to leave us a rating and review on our podcast. Leaving us a review is super quick. It only takes a minute, and it's so helpful to us as it really boosts this podcast to reach more people who need this information and this message. If you're listening on Apple Podcast, you can leave us a star rating and review. If you're watching on YouTube, you can hit the like button and leave us a comment. Overall, I truly appreciate you being with us here on the podcast. On behalf of me and my entire Fit Mother Project team, we truly feel honored and grateful to support you and your family on your journey to fantastic health. I thank you for your support of this podcast and of this mission. Also, if you're interested in joining our Complete Fit Mother program and becoming an official member of our community, you can visit our website, fitmotherproject.com. And on the Fit Mother site, you'll be able to see our Complete Fit Mother program, along with our online store with the best supplements designed for busy moms. And you'll also find a ton of free resources like recipes, workouts, meal plans, and more. God bless you and your family. This is Dr. Anthony Balduzzi signing off. I'll catch you on the next episodes of the Fit Mother Project podcast.